Welcome, everyone. This is the second episode of Dad Talk. My name is Van.
And I'm Brian. Today's topic we're kind of diving into is holiday traditions, some of the stuff that I do and how it kind of differs from some of the ways that Van celebrates as well. All right, so I'll go ahead and get started first. For me, we celebrate a little more traditionally, I guess. Kind of we follow we're the traditional Christian path. So for us, it's Christmas, Christmas Eve, are the main holidays, and then New Year's Eve. I mean, I don't really celebrate New Year's Eve personally anymore. As I've gotten older, I just kind of stay home and chill out. It's not really an outing thing for me. But our big one has always been Christmas and Christmas Eve. And it has definitely changed and evolved over time, especially with kids. So okay, I'll kind of go in. And if you have questions or kind of want to jump in, Van, feel free. The way that we do it, again, for us, we start actually fairly early in the season, like after Thanksgiving. We'll either get a tree or put up a tree, just kind of depends. I am frugal, so if trees are crazy expensive, we will use we have a fake tree. Like this year, we went to a couple places, and the kids couldn't find a tree that they liked for under $150, so we chose to go with our fake tree this year. So we'll usually do that right after Thanksgiving, or the first week of December, that first weekend.
Do you have one just handy somewhere?
We do. So we have a
Yeah.
couple different trees. So we have a bigger one that we can put in our front room, which is where we generally put it. We have a smaller one that will go in my wife's office, generally speaking. And if one of them doesn't go there, my middle Belle likes to have a Christmas tree in her bedroom. Like, she is my Christmas kid. Like, she loves to decorate, she loves to bake. Like, that's everything. Christmas is her jam. Like, she's my Christmas kid. The other kids love it as well, but like she's got the most intensity for it. And then we kind of start with the gifts and stuff. I started to buy a little bit earlier, and we kind of talk through with the kids and level set expectations. Inevitably, we get to about this point in time, and I realize I still need to buy gifts because I got about 90% done, and then there's always those one or two things that you have to figure out. Okay, who do I get stuff for? Sometimes
Yep.
people, like my brother's a great example. He's just he's tricky for me to choose what to get him. Yeah, so that's kind of up to date. Since I have a split household, I get my kids every Christmas Eve. So I get my two older every Christmas Eve. So we do most of our celebrating on Christmas Eve. And then I take them back, the two older go back to their mother for Christmas. And then I generally get them back the 26th, or just depends on like kind of what the vacation schedule is at that point. And so we do most of our celebration on Christmas Day, and what that'll look like. The kids will get up early, open gifts. We have the whole Santa shindig. Then we'll eat a meal with my family, and we go to
What
church.
what is the Santa shindig?
Santa brings gifts, so they gotta figure out whose gift is what, and then Santa always brings a family gift. And a family gift will generally be something that'll bring us together. So it could be a board game, or I'm gonna be honest, we don't really love board games. We like card games and dice games. Board games, I find with little kids, they really test my patience. Or anything that has something that clicks drives me absolutely crazy. So like Trouble, I strongly dislike that game because the kids just want to click that bubble. So we'll generally do card games or whatever. That's what Santa brings for the family. So that's kind of our Santa's shindig. Santa gives gifts that are wanted, but never giant gifts. So Santa isn't going to give an iPad or anything like that. He's going to be very targeted in something thoughtful that will be provided. Big gifts, let's see, last year, one of the big gifts was my kid wanted to enact, he wanted to go get like a barbell, like that's what he wanted for one of his gifts. He wanted, he's a lifter, so he wanted a barbell, and that's a couple $100. That was a parent gift. Like, Santa doesn't provide crazy gifts like that. It's generally something really thoughtful and insightful. No traces are left for us, minus cookies might be eaten, milk might be drank, but we had Santa definitely doesn't leave a lot of traces. Just like the elves are pretty low key in our house. So the elf on the shelf shenanigan, those are for the most part pretty low key. They're well behaved because that's the expectation of my house.
So, for people that don't know Christmas, what is Elf on the Shelf story?
It's terrifying. So the Elf on the Shelf story, it's probably one of the most amazing sales gimmicks I've ever seen. But basically, the elf comes for us in our home the first week of December, generally that first weekend, and it's an elf that basically reports back to Santa on the behavior of your kids. So my son calls him the narc, or the snitch, because like that's
Okay.
all that thing's doing is he's a snitch for Santa. Every night he moves, he hides somewhere else, might have some, in our home it might be light shenanigans, making a s'more, something of that nature, eating a cookie. But he does move. Um, and if you touch him, he loses his magic and you automatically go on the naughty list. So for us, that's a big one. Like, cause it's kind of like the whole Tinkerbell thing. Like, I don't believe in fairies. Same thing. You touch the elf, it kind of uh, shortens his lifespan. So that's the elf on the shelf. A way that my kids look at it. He reports back to Santa, and he's a little bit of a tattletale. So there is a book that goes with it that you can
Yeah,
read to
yeah.
your kids. We've read the book like twice or maybe 3 times.
Okay.
But that's not really our jam. So
Okay.
yeah, but the kids like it, and our youngest expects it. So she definitely like those elves are out and about in our house. As a parent, it's a challenge in itself because magically happens at night when people are sleeping.
What what has changed for you between when it was just you and your wife? I mean, it would be your ex-wife.
So when I was
When you had kids and when you didn't have kids.
so prior to kids, Christmas was just more targeted. Like it was very much like I didn't have to do anything. It was amazing. So for me, like I didn't have to cook. I just had to get gifts. So in the gift, vote like there were just less people, so the investment in gifts was less. And I was not as devout when I was younger. So we didn't go to church. So for us, it would be, we'd get up, we would do gifts, we'd have a meal. And then when I was married with my ex-wife, we would do one family one day, one family the other. We still do that even today, but we would go somewhere else and I would never have to cook. So if we went to my mother's house, my mom did all the cooking, had everything set up. It was great. I hosted, I think, once or twice, but when I was real, first, out of the military and kind of like being a semi-normal adult, um, and then we'd go to the other parents, the in-laws or whatever, and they would cook and do everything there. So there was just no responsibilities when I was before kids. Now that I have
Mm.
children, all of those responsibilities are on me. So for Christmas in our home, making sure all the presents are out and that, they're under the tree, in the appropriate time periods, making sure that they're, kids can't see them, going through lists, making sure it's somewhat equal. The kids, as they're getting a little bit older, you won't have this for a long time, unfortunately for you. The volume of gifts when kids are younger is more important than the value. So if, when they were little, if, Braden got 5 gifts, Bella needed 5 gifts, Sky needed 5 gifts. Now, they actually understand, okay, like I might get less because I've asked for something that's more expensive. Like some of the stuff that my son has asked for, and again, he's super into fitness, was, like he wanted an iron neck, which is like an exercise thing to help him be a better wrestler and grappler. And that was like $300. And he knew like that if that was going to be his gift, like that was his only gift. Or,
Mm.
some like dopamine bands or like, that stuff's just expensive. Um, so he's understanding that, the higher the price, like there's a budget that I stick to. So he's starting to get that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I organize all the cooking, make sure that everybody has enough food. We have to make all the cookies. This year is the first year we're making all the cookies. Darla's parents are snowbirds now, so they're in Florida. So we do my family Christmas at my house where I do all the cooking and everything with my family on Christmas Eve with my two oldest children, with all of my children. And then Christmas Day will be at Darla's house. So we are actually making all the cookies this year, and it's just little things where you don't realize if you're making cookies for 50 people, not only the volume of hours to do that, but there's cost incurred by that you just take a lot of that for granted when you're younger. But we always make sure to go to church on Christmas Eve specifically. That's the mass that my kids really enjoy. So yeah, so that's kind of ours. Is it's very focused on giving, and I make the kids buy their own gifts. So they have their own little budget, so they have to use their own money. They have to budget appropriately. And I think part of the reason we do that is understanding that giving, it does require sacrifice for it to mean a little bit more. So for me to give my kids, $10 each to be like, okay, go pick something for mom, means less than if they, do an extra chore to earn whatever, they want to spend, and then spend that money. That to me is a bigger sacrifice for them to understand what giving is. And then if they choose to overspend, which has happened, my son has done that a couple times, and he's pretty frugal, but then he has to do more work to make up for that. So I think it's important for them to understand the budgeting piece of a holiday too, because you don't want to go broke for Christmas, which I knew some people do, but I try to be fiscally responsible. So like I said, budgets and everything.
And when I get it flipped, sometimes it was Christian or Catholic.
Yep.
Okay, Christian.
Christian. My wife is Catholic. Like her family's pretty devout. She's not really Catholic. She's kind of like she switched over to more what the kids do. So our church is just a little bit different. More singing, more activity for kids to be involved so that they can really get the lessons, which I think is the important part.
Okay. What was the experience like when you met Darla, and then you had your two other kids, and you didn't have your youngest yet? Was that a different experience?
A little bit. So like we had Sky fairly quickly after I got remarried. We had Sky fairly quickly. And for me, and actually this is something that I think we could probably do like a whole like long chat about. When I brought my kids into so after my previous marriage ended, and I brought my kids into the new relationship, like I set very firm expectations of how I thought my children needed to be treated. And my wife, Darla, is amazing. She treats them like all our kids are treated the same. I mean, Skylar gets it a little easier. Like, I think that's because she's the youngest. So she's the baby. She obviously gets away with a little bit more. But the expectation was that they would just be treated like everybody. And Darla's family has been super amazing. So for those of you who don't know, my wife is one of 8. So family gatherings are rather massive. So when we go over there, there's so many grandkids. I mean, like we did Thanksgiving this year, and you and I talked about it, and I think there was like 50 people, 40, 50 people at my house. I think it was actually 30, is probably between 30 and 40 after we were said and done, because not everybody could make it. And it's just a lot, and all the grandkids are treated great. My kids, Darla's parents treat them like all the other grandkids and welcome them in, and everybody in that family has been really amazing. So they get treated like everybody else, and it's been like that since day one, because the belief is kids are just welcome no matter what. So that I've been really fortunate in that aspect, that expectation was kind of there, and that Darla's family's been very amazing, and just being inclusive and things like that, and teaching our kids a lot of stuff and being really awesome.
Okay, cool. One other question I had was for me, and I'll get into what we typically do. As a Christian or as a Catholic, what is it about Christmas that kind of prompts the gift giving and the kind of the traditions that you were talking about? Where do those kind of originate from? From what we do, I mean, it's kind of adapting some of that. So I'm curious, like, what are the fundamental things that that are kind of traditional to be celebrated in terms of a Christian or a Catholic for Christmas?
So for us and like kind of the way like I've taken into it when I was a little kid, like we've always been Christian, but not really practicing. Like it was like, hey, we believe, but we didn't really do a lot with the church when I was younger. I didn't really get into that till I was a little bit older. But it's really about stepping back from yourself and like, obviously it's celebrating, the birth of Christ. And then kind of like stepping back from yourself and your needs and being selfish and putting those that you love and giving to others that if you can volunteer time or money to food pantries or giving to those that are less fortunate to like bring light into their lives to make them happier and to really put aside your needs so that you can serve the greater good around you. It's kind of how we've really kind of pulled into it. That's what when we go to church, like it's really what they're trying to teach and preach is hey, like giving is a good thing, like if you have the ability to give, and it doesn't have to be financial. Like if you like my most valuable asset, if we're being honest, like isn't actually money at this point in my life. It's probably my time. Having 3 kids and jobs and all that jazz, trying to have hobbies, my time is super valuable. So if I can actually provide that time to like the church, for example, and be, sometimes they ask if I could be a photographer for events. I think that's something where it's very giving and it's me sacrificing something that's important to me for others so that they can appreciate and grow. So that's kind of how I've always taken it. And that's what we really try to, have our kids understand, that it's not really about what you receive that's important at Christmas. It's what can you give to better others.
Okay, cool. I think that's a good lesson. Do you have a big camera?
I do.
I didn't realize you were a,
A photo nerd.
practicing photographer.
I haven't. So for church, I haven't actually been able to make the dates work at this point in time. That is something I've volunteered for. Just haven't been able to actually get it because there's a couple times where we've just been out of town during some of the events, or since I have to take my kids back on Christmas Eve, like to their mother, the 2 older ones, we go to church and then I immediately have to take them to their mother. So if we go to early mass to make sure that we can go to church, and then I can't unfortunately take pictures after. Yeah, photography is kind of a cool hobby. I like a lot of artsy stuff. Photography, poetry, all that jazz. Darla's volunteered to be a door greeter, but everybody wants to be a door greeter. I mean, anything you want to do at our church, you can. They have
What
like
church do you go to?
I go to Door Creek. It's one of the bigger churches out here. There's, I think, 3 campuses.
Dark
We
Creek
go to
near McFarland.
Door Creek's about 15 minutes from us, so it's more in Cottage Grove.
Okay.
There's one
I think I
in
know that one.
yeah, there's one in DeForest as well, and I think one downtown. So we generally go to the one in Cottage Grove one. That's the one we generally go to. I think we might try out the DeForest one,
Mhm.
just because they all rotate preachers and it's a newer church. Like the building's newer, so I just want to see it. So we just kind of like the kids were curious, so we'll probably get one of the same 3 pastors all kind of switch out. So it's kind of nice to give the kids something a little bit different too.
Okay. Well, I guess it's my turn, huh?
Yeah.
Um, one second here. Let's see. I mean, as far as I can remember, we've celebrated Christmas as well. Uh, we are what I would consider myself now, and I didn't always, is a as a somewhat practicing Buddhist. My wife is for sure. Um, I think it took me a while to get there. Um, and I mean, as a Buddhist, there isn't really anything off limits. And that's, I think, something that's very good about that religion. It's something that doesn't limit anything. You can take things from other cultures and other religions and practice them if you like, if you want to, if you think it's something that will benefit you. Um, so as far as I can remember, and I didn't always consider myself a Buddhist, when I was younger, up until today, we've celebrated Christmas. So what we typically, I guess when I was little, it was always about receiving. It was always about getting gifts. And we grew up in a family that, I mean, didn't have a lot of money. So we had somewhat of a sponsor. It was my dad and my mom's sponsor that kind of helped us as my parents uh, immigrated here from Vietnam, and uh, she and her husband uh, always made an effort. I think until I was probably 13 or 14, um, to take us out shopping, probably a couple weeks before Christmas, where we could basically buy whatever we wanted.
And you're
Um,
from a fairly big family as well.
yeah, family. We have six in our family, in terms of children, and then two parents, so eight altogether. Um, so yeah, up until I was probably 13 or 14, um, we always met up with her. We lived in Green Bay, so we always kind of went to the mall, and we basically bought whatever we wanted. I don't think we got to buy things that were really extravagant until we were older and we knew what they were. So we never really bought like a bunch of stuff. Like, I don't want to make it sound like we had this rich lady that just bought us like everything from the mall. Um, but I
No,
mean,
but as a kid, kind of like your perception
yeah,
of, you know, value is different.
yeah. Um, so that those were the times when um, I remember pretty clearly because that's the time that I really enjoyed going shopping. I think um, my siblings are far enough apart where I can only really remember me going with my older sister and my next older sister. Um, whereas I didn't have a whole lot with my two brothers and my oldest sister. So that's that's what we typically did. And like when we were done shopping, we would go back to her house, um, and we'd have this tradition of making cookies. And we'd frost cookies and decorate them, and we'd have like a whole day of it. And then we'd go home. I think the next couple of weeks we'd try to box everything up and wrap them um and get those under the tree. I don't think we've ever done. We might have done a fake tree. No, sorry, a real tree, maybe once, and then
They're a
after that,
mess.
I mean, yeah, they get all over. I think after that, it was always a fake tree that we had in the basement. Um, but I mean, things started to change. I mean, obviously after uh 13, 14, I think I was getting a little bit of an allowance. I had a little bit of money. I think it kind of shifted where I we weren't really like we turned into adults, so we weren't typically getting gifts anymore. I think at that point, I had my first nephew and niece, so it kind of shifted to them. So um, I trying to kind of put together whatever money I had to buy gifts for them, and I think we've always made an effort to buy gifts for our parents, which was always a struggle. I think at that time, uh, until I was, I don't know, 18 or 20 or something like that, we'd always try to figure out what to get our parents. It was always a struggle for them. They're very frugal as well. I think most of the time they shop at like Goodwill. Um,
Do you still struggle getting stuff for your parents, or do you kind of move past where you don't get them stuff anymore?
well, I mean, we still try. I mean, when they're around, um, I think it's been different these past couple of years. I mean, the pandemic, we've been getting the gifts because they've been around, but typically, I told you they half of the year they're in Vietnam. So when they're here, we typically try to get them a gift. Um, But
And so basically they're extreme snowbirds where when it's cold in Wisconsin, they go to Vietnam.
yeah, basically. I think there was just the pandemic years when they were back for Christmas and the holidays. Um, but I was always trying to like trick my dad, because he'd always be able to guess what's in the box. So that was something that we always tried to do. I mean, at this point, it's just for me, and I don't know what my other siblings do. It's just try to get him something that he's going to use, not just kind of chuck to the side. So it's typically clothes and stuff like that. Whereas before, we try to make his life easier with technology and stuff like that. But typically, that just gets tossed to the side because it doesn't get used, or he doesn't know how to use it, or he just doesn't want to change. Um, and then my mom's breed. I think typically I get my mom just clothes. Uh, she likes the color purple, and she likes sweatshirts, so it's typically a purple sweatshirt. Um, so I mean, growing up until I was older, just it was just gift giving. I don't think we thought more or less about it. Um, I think today and probably not too far into the past, it's changed a little. Uh, I think gift giving in general has changed a little bit for me. It's I think this is where kind of the Buddhist part comes in a little bit, and um, I think the main thing that I've learned since being married to Yin and spending more time in Vietnam has been uh, kind of going to celebrations like weddings and birthdays and things like that. And it's typical that people don't give gifts; they give money.
Oh,
And
interesting.
um, I actually would prefer that quite a bit, because one, you can't mess up what the gift is; you just get the money. Um, but what I saw was when it was my wedding over there, um, that there were a lot of siblings or extended family that would give, and they would give quite a bit. But I knew that they didn't have a lot of money, and they gave because one uh, I believe they loved us and cared about us, but it's tradition to do that, to kind of give, and it's kind of another way to think about it, for the lessons that you were telling your kids. It's to give, and then you'll receive back later. You don't know when, and you don't know how, but you give so you can have some support.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's interesting because I would say giving money is like from like my mother's a great example. Like if I were to give my mom money, like it'd be almost like a taboo where she'd be like, well, you're just not being thoughtful, Brian. Like you're not, like she would literally take like she'd be a little bit offended. Same thing uh for my wife. She'd be like, well, it's the, a lot of it is like it's the thought that counts. So it's actually really interesting to kind of look at it like that. So it's the
And
kind of putting good out to the universe and good comes back kind of deal.
yeah, and I think I didn't really get it until um, the birthdays I went to, and then mostly my son's birthday. It's kind of a sense of, or me going to other birthdays, and like I typically give more than I usually would, because I see it as I don't know if anything's gonna come back from this if I give you all of this. Um, but one, I want you to know that I care about you, and two, uh, I I mean I don't want it to be like a shackle that, oh, you owe me or anything, but I want you to know that um, you're in my life, and if things come up, I might come to you for help. Um, not not saying that you have to do it, but it's an easier ask um, when the time comes. And it's kind of like, oh, I believe that you'll be in my corner when that time comes. Um, and I think it's not, oh, I'll give a bunch of money to this one person that I don't really care about at all. And I think it's more of like giving that money because you care about them and you want them in your corner in the future, or you just
Nice.
want to be connected to them in the future. And that's kind of how we approach gift giving now, or I do. Um, I think in the past year or so, I've gotten connected a little bit more to my extended family over here, some of my cousins and stuff like that, where I haven't been previous years. And what kind of gift giving has turned into for my kind of immediate family is what we typically do is it's usually my sister, my mid sister, starts this Google sheet right after Thanksgiving, and then it's just all of our names listed out with all the kids, and then people put their gift ideas in there. And um, sometimes it's hard for me to see the point of it because it's just all kind of listed out for you. It's like there's not a whole lot
Yeah.
of idea generation behind it. Um, but again, I start to look at it like I think about it more and more. Well, sometimes I still don't get it, but at the end of the day, it kind of comes back to, oh, I want you to know that I care about you like the siblings, and then also the kids to always have something with, I mean, Uncle Van's name on it or Aunt Ian's name on it, to know that uh, if they needed anything or if we wanted to reach out in the future, you know who we are at least, kind of thing, because you get so separated by distance and um, by people being busy and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, it kind of turned into that. And I think this year, we finished the immediate family shopping, and it's kind of doing that extended family shopping still. And we're not typically sure what to get them. But it's been kind of the first year, maybe the second year of really kind of making an effort to um, get some things for them. Just kind of going back to that kind of thought process of being more connected and having each other in people's corners and stuff like that.
Nice. So celebrating Christmas, anything for New Year's for you? We got about 5 minutes.
New Year's, no. I mean, we count down probably midnight. We'll just count it down, and then we'll just say Happy New Year. For New Year's, for our the actual Vietnamese New Year, which is not the first of the year. It's changes every year because they go off of the lunar calendar, um, which is I don't know how that's measured, but it's typically sometime in February, typically in the mid, maybe end of February. But there's a whole celebration if you're in Vietnam. I think they're off for probably a week or two in Vietnam.
Nice.
Um, I haven't ever been there, but I don't know all of the customs. But it's typically that you get these red envelopes, and those are meant to put some money in there and uh, give that to the little kids that are running around. Typically, um, the adults don't get it, but um, the the thought behind it is, if you're visiting somebody or someone comes over your house and they're kids, they typically have to line up and say what they're thankful for, what they want to have in the next year, and kind of say it in a very respectful way. And they kind of have to meet all the kind of requirements, and then then they'll be able to get it. Um, because it's really kind of giving this to them So we then the adult would respond in kind of a similar fashion. Okay, I wish you this in the next coming year, and this, and this in the next coming year. It's usually a typical one that you'd hear. It's like, okay, I wish you and your brothers and sisters and your family happiness and well-being. I hope that you go to school and get good grades. Um, and if I don't know if you're playing sports, I hope that you go out there and do your best and hopefully maybe win a championship or something like that. So it's kind of just talking about what you're thankful for and then what you wish to achieve in the next year.
Nice.
I think we did that before the pandemic, and we had the kids line up at my brother's house, and that was pretty fun to kind of make because it's not too traditional that we've done that before. But it was pretty fun to um, have the kids try to say it in the right fashion before we give it to them. I think that year we had them pick. We had I fanned out the envelopes, and we put different amounts in there. So I think
Nice.
the we had the highest one $100, and then we had like five $1, and then all in between. We probably had like 15 of them, and they had money ranging from $1 to $100. I think if they got a dollar, we let them pick again. But yeah, that's the typical tradition. I think that's one small part of it, and then the other days, there are prayers that they typically do, and in Buddhism, it's typically uh, doing prayer to our ancestors and also to the Buddhist gods and stuff like that. So it's typically at the home. We can also go to the temple and stuff like that. I think the past couple of years we've gone to temples. I think the nearest one here is in like Milwaukee. I think there's one in Madison, but we haven't found it. But yeah, that's typically how our New Year's have gone. It's typically New Year's is one of the it's kind of like the Christmas that we
Gotcha.
celebrate here. It's their big holiday.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of lessons, I think that's something that you wanted to get to. I haven't really gotten there yet.
Well, your
I,
kids are still pretty little, so
yeah, I mean, Jace is two, Cammy's too young to know very much of anything. Um, but I mean, I think there's definitely things that you said that I would want to teach them. I think the giving part is something that is sometimes that I forget. Giving time uh, away and volunteering. I think that's something that I would want to do in the future. Um, so I think those are good lessons. I think it's something that I've learned just from experiences. Just give, not knowing that you'll
freely.
receive anything back. But I mean, I think there's also kind of a bunch of people that I've heard talk, like podcasts or audiobooks or just things online or people that I've heard speak. It's just give generously when you can.
Yeah, give freely.
Yeah, Brian, any tips that we forgot to talk about or anything or things you want your kids to learn from Christmas or your holidays?
I think we covered the big ones. So I think we could probably wrap up today's. I think if you want to get into other cool tips and tricks for kids, that'd probably be another episode, or another conversation about, what are the big things we wanted them to take away from just our teachings. But I think for the holiday ones, the giving and that comes with sacrifice is really the one that I think is important for the holiday season.
Okay, cool. I think that was a really important one too, and I think I'll definitely take that one away. All right, Brian. Until next time.
All right, excellent.
Talk to you
See ya.
later. Bye.